Voicemail came in at 2:37 on a Wednesday afternoon, and by Thursday morning my son's engagement was over. But I should start at the beginning. My name is Lawrence. I turned 63 last April. I spent 31 years building a commercial real estate firm in Charleston, South Carolina. Nothing flashy, nothing that makes the news. We managed properties, brokered deals, kept our heads down. My late wife, Sandra, used to say I was the only man she knew who could turn a negotiation into a lullaby. She meant it as a compliment. I think. Sandra passed 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end. After that, it was just me and my son Andrew, and the house on Trad Street that she'd loved so much she'd made me promise never to sell it. Andrew was 29 when he met Ivy. I remember the first time he called to tell me about her. He was speaking faster than usual, stumbling over his words in a way he hadn't done since he was 12 and trying to explain a broken window. "Dad," he said, "I think she might be the one." I asked how long he'd known her. He paused. 6 weeks, he said. "But Dad, you'll understand when you meet her." I've been around long enough to know that when a grown man says you'll understand when you meet her, what he really means is, please don't ask too many questions. I met Ivy 2 months later at a dinner Andrew organized at a restaurant on East Bay Street. She walked in 10 minutes late, wearing a dress that cost more than my first car, and smiled at me the way people smile when they've practiced it. Not warm. Calibrated. She had the kind of beauty that makes rooms go quiet, and she knew it. She ordered the most expensive wine on the menu without looking at the price. That alone told me something. She was 31, she said. She'd grown up in Charlotte. Her father had passed away, a wealthy developer, she mentioned twice. She'd gone to Wake Forest, worked in lifestyle branding, whatever that meant, and had a following on Instagram that she referenced 3 separate times during dinner. She also, within 45 minutes of sitting down, asked me whether I planned to keep both my properties when I retired or consolidate. Andrew laughed it off. "She's just curious, Dad. She's like that." I smiled and said nothing, but I remembered it. Over the next few months, Ivy became a fixture. She had a gift for making herself indispensable. She'd drop off meals when Andrew was sick, text me cheerful messages on holidays, show up to things early and help without being asked. Andrew was besotted. He'd look at her the way Sandra used to look at the ocean, like it was something that could never disappoint him. I wanted to be wrong about her. I genuinely did. Then Andrew called me on a Tuesday evening in October and told me he proposed. She'd said yes. They were planning a small engagement party at my house, just close friends and family, maybe 30 people, the following month. I said congratulations. I meant it, or tried to. But I started paying closer attention. I noticed that Ivy never talked about Charlotte friends. Not a single one ever came to visit. I noticed that her lifestyle branding business had no website I could find, and the Instagram account she'd mentioned was filled with posts about luxury resorts and designer bags, but nothing that looked like actual income. I noticed that she drove a leased BMW that Andrew mentioned casually he was helping her with while she sorted out some cash flow. I have a friend named Douglas who spent 20 years as a private investigator before he retired to Somerville. We go fishing together twice a year. I called him. "I don't want to find something," I told him. "I want to know there's nothing to find." He called me back 11 days later. There was something to find. Ivy, whose full name was Ivy Christine Marsh, not Ivy Martin as she told Andrew, had a civil judgment against her in Mecklenburg County for $47,000, a default from 2019 that had never been satisfied. She'd been evicted from an apartment in Charlotte in 2021 after 6 months of unpaid rent. The BMW wasn't just helped by Andrew, it was entirely in his name. And the developer father who had passed away. Douglas found a man matching the description, alive and well, working at a hardware store in Gastonia. Ivy hadn't spoken to her family in years. According to a former neighbor Douglas tracked down, nobody knew exactly why. There was also a pattern. 3 men in the past 5 years, one in Atlanta, one in Raleigh, one in Richland. Each relationship had lasted between 8 and 18 months. Each had ended with the man considerably poorer than when it started. None of them had pursued legal action. One of them, Douglas, found him through a mutual contact, said only this when asked, "I just wanted it to be over." I sat with all of that for 2 days. Then I put it away, not because I was going to ignore it, because I needed to be patient. The engagement party was on a Saturday in November. Sandra's hydrangeas had long since gone dormant, but the house on Trad Street still looks beautiful in the fall. The old brick, the piazza, the light that comes through the live oaks in the late afternoon. We had a caterer, a small jazz trio Andrew had hired, and about 28 people who loved him. Ivy arrived looking radiant. She worked the room like a professional, laughing at the right moments, touching arms, remembering names. Andrew watched her with that same ocean expression. My chest hurt watching him. Around 7:30, most people had drifted to the back garden. I was standing near the sideboard in the dining room, refilling my glass, when Ivy came in from the hallway. She closed the door behind her. I noticed that first, the door closing. "Lawrence," she said, "I'm so glad we have a moment." I set down the bottle. "Is that right?" She smiled, but something in it had shifted. The calibration was gone. What replaced it was harder. "I think we both know this has been a little tense," she said. "I know you've had concerns about me. I understand that. You're protective of Andrew." "I am," I said. "I want us to be on the same side," she said. "I think that's possible if we're honest with each other." I waited. She took a breath. Then she said it very quietly, almost conversationally, the way you might mention the weather. "I need you to wire $250,000 to an account I'll send you. I'd like it done before the new year." I didn't move. "If you don't," she said, "I'm going to tell Andrew that you made a pass at me." Back in September, when he was out of town and I stopped by to drop something off. I'll say it wasn't the first time. She paused. "I have a friend who backed me up. And Andrew, well, he loves me. You know how this goes." The room was very quiet. The jazz trio was playing something with a slow brush rhythm outside. Someone laughed in the garden. I said, "That's a serious thing to say." "I know," she said. "I'm a serious person." I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I set my phone on the sideboard, face up. The recording app had been running since 6:15 that evening. An hour and 22 minutes of audio. Everything from the moment she'd walked in. "So am I said. The color left her face the way water drains from a tub, all at once, and then it was just gone. She stared at the phone, then at me. "You can't." "The file is already saved to the cloud," I said. "My attorney has a copy. Douglas Whitmore. You may have noticed him earlier. He was the man by the fireplace. He heard the entire conversation from the hallway. He's a former licensed investigator. His notes are already written." She said nothing. "I also have the judgment from Mecklenburg County," I said. "The eviction, the account of what happened to the man in Richmond. I have a very clear picture of who you are, Ivy. I've had it for 3 weeks. Her composure cracked just for a moment. Just long enough for me to see what was underneath. Not remorse. Not fear exactly. Something more like the look of a person who has miscalculated and knows it and is trying very quickly to decide what to do next. I didn't give her the chance. "Andrew is going to come inside in a few minutes," I said. "When he does, I'm going to ask him to sit down, and I'm going to tell him everything. You are welcome to stay for that conversation. You are also welcome to leave. But if you leave with nothing, and you do not contact my son again." She left. She walked straight through the dining room, said something to Andrew in passing. I couldn't hear what, and was out the front door in under 2 minutes. I heard the Uber she must have called arriving on the street. I heard Andrew call after her. I heard the door close. He came into the dining room looking confused and a little pale. "Dad, what did you?" "Sit down, son," I said. "I need to tell you some things." I have gone over that conversation many times in my mind. The way he sat down across from me at his mother's dining room table in the house where he grew up. surrounded by the sound of a party that was quietly unraveling in the garden outside. The way he listened, the way his face went from confused to disbelieving to something that looked, toward the end, like a man being woken from a very long sleep. He didn't say much. He asked twice whether Douglas was sure. I said yes. He picked up my phone and listened to the recording himself, about 4 minutes of it, stopping before the end. He set it back down carefully, like it might break. "How long?" he said. "I've known most of it for 3 weeks." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" It was the right question, and I didn't have a perfect answer. I told him I'd needed to be sure. I told him I'd been afraid he wouldn't believe me. I told him that I'd wanted to be wrong. "I wanted to be wrong too," he said finally. The guests, to their credit, took the cue when I went out to the garden and said there'd been a family matter and we were wrapping up early. Nobody pressed. A few of the older ones gave Andrew a look, the kind that means we'll talk later, and we understand. That was enough. The house was empty by 9:30. Andrew and I sat on the piazza with 2 glasses of bourbon and didn't say much for a while. The air had that particular November cool that I've always loved. Dry and thin and carrying just enough of the river. "She told me she wanted to start a family," he said at one point. "She said she could see herself living in this house." "I know," I said. "I wasn't stupid," he said. "I want you to know that. I knew something was off. I just kept." "You kept hoping you were wrong," I said. "That's not stupidity. That's love." He looked at me. "Did you ever feel that way about Mom? Like you were choosing to believe something you weren't sure about?" I thought about it. "No," I said. "With your mother I was certain, every day." He nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. "I think somewhere I knew it wasn't like that." We didn't talk about Ivy again that night. The legal part came later. My attorney, a woman named Patricia who'd handled my firm's contracts for 15 years and had a voice like a judge even when she was ordering coffee, sent a formal letter the following Monday. It laid out the evidence we had, referenced the recording in Douglas's sworn statement, and made clear that any further contact with Andrew or with me would result in criminal extortion charges being filed. It also outlined the civil judgment and the prior conduct, and noted that we were prepared to share that information with the relevant county attorney's office regardless. We didn't hear from Ivy again. Patricia told me later that she'd consulted a defense attorney shortly after receiving the letter. The attorney had apparently advised her, very directly, that the recording was clean and the case against her was airtight. She was also informed, gently but unmistakably, that the 3 other men had been contacted, and the 2 of them were now willing to speak. She had no leverage. She had nothing. She didn't fight it. There are things I've thought about in the months since. Whether I should have told Andrew sooner. Whether the waiting made it worse for him. 3 weeks of an engagement that I already knew was built on something rotten. I go back and forth on that. Patricia says I did the right thing by waiting until I had everything. Douglas says the same. Some nights I agree with them. Other nights, I sit on the piazza with a bourbon and think about the way Andrew's face looked when he listened to that recording. And I'm not sure there was a version of this that didn't hurt him. I'm not sure I could have softened it. What I know is this: he's doing well now. He's been seeing a therapist, his idea, not mine, which I took as a good sign. He started training for a half marathon, which Sandra would have loved. He came over for Thanksgiving and cooked the turkey himself for the first time, and it was genuinely good. And we sat at the dining room table where all of it had unfolded and talked about nothing more serious than football and whether I should repaint the shutters. "Blue," he said, "about the shutters. Mom always wanted blue, so I painted them blue." There are things I learned from this that I wish I'd had the chance to tell Sandra. She was a better judge of people than I was, sharper, faster, and kinder about it. She would have known about Ivy in 20 minutes. She would have handled it better than I did, and Andrew would have listened to her without the 3-week delay. But Sandra isn't here, and I'm the one who's left, and I did the best I could with what I had. To anyone watching this who has a child in a relationship that doesn't feel right, trust that instinct. You don't have to be cruel. You don't have to storm in. But pay attention. Ask the quiet questions. And if you find something, be patient, be thorough, and be ready. Because the people who do this, the Ivies of the world, they're counting on you to second-guess yourself. They're counting on your love for your child to make you hesitate. They've done this before. They know exactly how long it takes for a good man to talk himself out of what he already knows. Don't give them that time. Andrew is 30 now. He's got his mother's eyes and his mother's stubbornness, and he's going to be fine. I know that the way I knew Sandra was the right one. Not hoping, not deciding, just knowing it the way you know the shape of your own house, in the dark. I painted the shutters the second week of December. Stood on the ladder in the cold with a brush and thought about nothing in particular. The color Sandra had picked out years ago from a little swatch card she'd kept in the kitchen drawer. It looked right. It looked like it had always been that way. I still think about the moment I set that phone on the sideboard, how quiet the room was, how the jazz trio was playing something slow outside and someone laughed in the garden right as the color left her face. People ask me sometimes, not often, but sometimes, whether I feel bad about how it unfolded, whether I could have been gentler, faster, kinder in some direction or another. I sit with that question. I don't dismiss it. What I keep coming back to is this. Ivy didn't fail because she was caught. She failed because of what she chose to be. Long before she ever walked into my dining room, every decision she had made, the false name, the unpaid debts, the men she'd taken from in Atlanta and Raleigh and Richmond, those weren't mistakes. They were direction. And directions, held long enough, become destinations. That's not judgment. That's just how it works. Andrew asked me once, a few months after everything, whether I thought she had ever felt anything real. I told him I didn't know. I still don't. But I told him that the answer to that question wouldn't change what happened, and it wouldn't change what he deserved going forward. He deserved someone whose love wasn't a transaction. He deserved to know that such people exist. His mother was one of them. What carried me through all of it wasn't anger. I want to be clear about that. Anger would have made me move too fast, say the wrong thing, tip my hand before I had everything I needed. What carried me through was something quieter. A kind of steadiness that I think comes only from having lived long enough to know the difference between a feeling and a fact. I had facts. I waited until I had all of them. That patience wasn't cold. It was the most caring thing I could do for my son. I think about the 3 qualities that actually matter in a situation like this. And I mean matter in the way that determines outcomes, not just how you feel about yourself afterward. The first is integrity. Doing the right thing when it would be far easier and far less painful to look away. I could have told myself it wasn't my business. I could have decided Andrew was an adult and let him learn on his own. I didn't, because I knew what was coming for him, and I couldn't live with that. The second is clear thinking, not cleverness. I'm not a clever man. But the willingness to separate what you hope is true from what the evidence shows. Douglas gave me facts. I read them without flinching. That was the hardest part, honestly. Harder than the confrontation. The third is the kind of strength that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't raise its voice. It sets a phone on a sideboard and waits. Andrew has that in him. I saw it the night he sat across from me at his mother's table and listened to everything without breaking. He was heartbroken. He was also completely steady. Sandra would have recognized that in him immediately. I painted the shutters blue in December. It took about 3 hours. I thought about Sandra the whole time, and about Andrew, and about the fact that the house was still standing, and the hydrangeas would come back in the spring, and that some things, if you take care of them, hold. That's enough. That has always been enough.